That's the thing with cycling in general too. Say like other sports, you have very limited events you do maybe, but with cycling, it's like, especially cycling, even use the top riders in cycling, they actually win very little in comparison to how much they're racing. Mm-hmm. When you actually think about it, they do like 80 race days a year. They win like 5 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Being slouches.
Today, we've got Mason Schofield on the couch. The man has gone from zero to hero in the cycling world. We'll talk about it a little bit or a lot bit. We're going to talk about Mason's
Until the
rise.
batteries die.
Until the batteries, yeah.
Mine or the cameras.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Mason's rise from basically a novice cyclist to a racing basically professionally at this point in a very short amount of time, around 14 months? Mm-hmm. All right. We'll get to Mason in just a minute, but first, I am Coach Dale Sanford.
I am Coach Jonny Brown.
And I am Coach Bryant Funston. We are three of the coaches here at BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking out Facebook and YouTube at Build Peak Compete, and just to be confusing, all up on that Instagram at BPC Performance.
So I've thought about changing the Instagram many, many times, but then I'm like, well, every podcast we've done so far is going to be wrong.
Just roll with it.
The problem is now, too, once you change it, if you want to change back, you can't for a certain amount of time now.
There you go.
So if you change your account and you're like, I don't really like it, I want to go back, you're limited and you got to stick with it for a while.
Jonny knows because he was changing his every other day for a while there.
I've had the same Instagram account since I started my Instagram, actually. I've always had the same.
J-Star for everything.
Exactly.
5 posts.
You don't want to know
all
what...
5 posts.
All five posts.
All right. We've got Mason on the couch here. So the gist of it is, Mason, let's just with it. Fast forward. Mason decided to get into cycling, started racing, demolished some people early on, and then kept working, and now he's racing basically D1 crit races 14 months later. So we're going to backtrack a little bit, read a little Tarantino here. So... Mason, give everybody like a little background on your, like sports in general. Did you grow up playing sports? Like, how was that?
Yeah, so grew up in a super athletic family. Like, had 2 older brothers that were really talented football players. So they were definitely kind of like the whole athletic like nature going around the family. But I actually really didn't. I mean, I played some flag football, which was those were I peaked then.
Oh, dangerous.
That was those were the glory days. But yeah, I did a little bit like in elementary school, but just the team sport thing wasn't really my thing. Like I remember trying to get into it. Like I tried a cross country practice one time and it was fun, but the commitment kind of worried me. And really like I just kind of stuck to, we grew up racing motocross and I was kind of the only one that stuck with it through the teenage years. I mean, obviously that went hand in hand. I loved riding my mountain bike on the weekends and stuff. It's just like a fun thing, throw some gym shorts on and go hit the trails. People used to joke around. They thought I lived on the Wolf River trails. But,
who's that homeless boy living on the Wolf River trails?
They all used to, it was Poppy Sealbinder stopped me one time, was like, I think
That's
there's...
pain train, baby.
The pain train.
You're in luck.
She was like, yeah, I basically actually thought you had like a tent somewhere. She's like, we were all trying to see if there was just like some like weird shelter you had built. But yeah, didn't really play a whole lot of sports growing up other than racing motorcycles. I was literally the dorky band brother. So,
but you clearly loved riding your bike.
Yeah, loved anything 2 wheels. Like I was always growing up, like I've been a big proponent of like, I called it like mechanical art was always a thing. So like anything with 2 wheels, loved like looking at bicycles, watching bike races. It was super cool. Like I used to love like GCN in its infancy. Like just watching all these different little like vlogs and stuff. And it was just cool. Like Specialized had all that stuff growing up about like all the World Cups and stuff. So I was like huge fan of the sport and just anything two wheels.
Now, how old are you now? Let's give some context.
Growing up, I'm like, that wasn't that long ago, dude.
Yeah. So growing up 2 years ago. No, so I'm 23.
Do you remember when you were 23, Dale?
Not much of it.
Johnny's actually the third oldest here.
That makes me feel old.
We got the
now.
youngest guy over here. Mason's, it starts, Johnny.
Don't like that.
Starts.
Do not like that.
All right, so let's sort of fast forward now.
Yeah.
You love riding your bike. You decide you wanted to try out road racing?
Yeah, so we get, like, I had dabbled in it a little bit as a teenager and just wasn't very good at it. And just pretty quickly, it was like, I like dirt bikes. So fast forward, get into college, the pandemic breaks out. And right before the pandemic broke out, I still had a road bike and was riding it like to class a couple of times. I was like, this is really fun. I went on like a couple of road rides, but like never anything crazy. And then we get back and all the streets are closed. There's no one out there. And it was like, I can go ride down Poplar right now on my road bike and not see a single car. This is really cool. And was like doing some stuff at some bike shops and like was just kind of enjoying like sort of getting to live that life of just like getting up and riding and like being healthy. Like I hadn't worked out in so long and like was kind of discovering like how good it feels to exercise and just like not always ache and stuff like that. Like it was cool. Like it was this kind of cool point of like getting to sort of grow up a little bit and like just the world was kind of a scary place at that time, and it was just very easy to sort of make sense and just chill out and just go ride my bike and, go hit all these local little early morning group rides and stuff. It was such a fun group of people.
So is that when you realized your fitness was progressing really quick? Like at what point did you say to yourself, yeah, I want to give this road racing stuff a try? Like,
so it was
in your mind, did you go from, I wanted to see how far I could go with this, or was this, I wanted to just go do a road race and see what happens?
Trying to take a KOM of yours on Harbortown. And yeah, so
did you?
No.
Good.
It's still there, I think.
We would have ended this.
Not until after this conversation.
We won't even talk about CD Smith. There's this ongoing talk about the road that this train runs by right behind us here.
Train.
That Johnny's gonna try to. I've had that one for a long time. Anyway, so trying to take a Harbortown.
Yeah, so after work one day, I was like, I just like, there's this KOM, I always ride this road. Like, it's a tailwind that day. I was like kind of getting into like looking at wind direction and stuff. That was probably the furthest I ever gotten to really paying attention, Johnny can say. But I remember riding and like going hard. And I don't know any other way to describe this. This sounds probably super goofy to anyone, but I'm pedaling and out of nowhere, I just like shifted my body in this certain way, which really what it was like locking my core in place. And I was like, I'm going fast right now. Like, this is cool. And this isn't like, I'm not dying. Like, this is like, I'm going like, like it used to be the thing was like, I want to go over 20 miles an hour. And it's like, I'm doing it. And this is like, this is doable. And like, this is really cool. And like, I just feel like I kept imagining Peter Sagan from Richmond Worlds when he made his attack. And I literally like, it's so dorky, but it's like, I was just thinking about that and was like I kind of like, I'm envisioning like, this is fun. And I was like, I maybe want to like do some races. Like if nothing else, like I just want to keep going fast like this. It's like Ricky Bobby.
There we go. That's awesome.
So unfortunately, when in this time, there were no races.
No.
Like there was no options. So, to some extent, you had a little bit extra time to build fitness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of get a head start. Where, what made you, or what was the deciding factor to jump into that first race?
It probably started a lot with like, I feel like vlogging started getting really popular during the pandemic, and you start watching all these guys like vlogging at races like that were, kind of right as like some of the races were coming back, and you're like, man, this looks like that would be a cool thing to aspire for. Like, and then there were just like, I got to talk to some cool guys. I got to talk Alexei Vermeulen. At one point, he and I got connected, and I remember he was one of the guys that like pretty quickly, it wasn't so much I want to do races, it was I want to see how far in the sport I can move up.
Gotcha.
Like I just I feel like there's this kind of window of like maybe not even age, but just like me wanting to do it, me having the time and the lifestyle to do it. And I remember just like him and a couple of people, even some of my good friends were just like, dude, go for it. Like if that's what you want to do, like
full send, man.
You're passionate about it. Like go try it. And it was like, I just kind of decided like, at the end of the day, even if it didn't work out, I'd be more disappointed if I didn't try it. and I'd be way happier, hanging up the wheels, knowing like, hey, I swung for the fences and I, missed and hit myself with the bat, but like at least it was, fun. And
Yeah,
I got to
we chatted about that some last year on it. So your first race, we'll be kind of quick on this. So we can spend more time sort of in the meat of the whole thing. But first race was Sumatanga. The race, this guy jacks his clavicle up. Your first broken bone, right?
Both of us.
And your experience in your first race was
we get to the finish and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm like have a chance at like I could get on the podium at my first road race, and then I'm just see sky ground and start tumbling and get up, bike's cracked, wheels are tacoed. Someone had just given me like a brand new jacket to wear and it was just ripped in half, and I was like, my friend had taken off of work to drive me to this race and help me and like support me, and we stayed together. And I remember just being in the car and he was like just best friend all through high school, and just literally like I'm teary-eyed and he's just like, I know this hurts. It's like, it's gonna be okay.
That was nice of him.
It hurts.
I thought you were going to say he unfriended you.
It did. Yeah, we haven't talked since actually.
That's awfully nice of him, because I had to walk my own bike back to the car and load it onto the back. And then Brian's like, you okay? Like, nah, I can't raise my arm, and then my shoulder hurts like hell.
I bought you a few beers on the way home to ease the pain.
Like a mid-strength beer and an Advil.
That's a partner.
So you decided to stick with it, clearly. Yeah. So you bounce back quick from that. And so just run us through that first year, because you ended up upgrading a ton. It's like every race, I think you were in a different category.
So we did Sumatanga, and right after that was like, I don't have a bike. Like, well, this was cool, but like time to figure something else out. And I remember Will Tucker, like at Ins Ladding, texted me, and he was like, hey, I heard you crashed. It's really sags. You had a really cool bike. He kept calling it was an Eddie Merckx. He kept calling it the Merckx.
Oh,
He's like, man, I just, the Merckx is the end of an era, because don't worry. I know you want to do this. We're going to get you set up on something cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And
I remember we had this meeting, and it was right as I started working for him. And he was like, you know what? You're about to invest a lot in helping me grow my company, and I want to invest in helping you chase your dream. So I'm going to set you up with a road bike. And I mean, that turned into a road bike, him making sure that I used to take the shop van to races. Like, I mean, really like just took me under the wing and just made sure, like, I don't know, it was sort of this mutual thing of like, I literally gave him a little gift for our opening. It was kind of an inside joke, but on the back it said, thanks for helping me chase my dreams. I want to help you chase yours too. And it was sort of just that mutual thing that we had of like, he would let me take time off to go to races, which was cool. Cause like it was dorky. I was that, Cat 4, Cat 3 that was like, borderline sleeping in the van going to races, cause I just wanted to do it. Like, it was
you weren't homeless on the Wolf River trails.
No, it's not. It was in the back of a Mercedes Sprinter, actually.
Man at least has a van now, down by the river. There he is.
But yeah, so just started doing literally every race I could. I mean, started going like, I pretty quickly got from 4 to 3, and then once you're a 3, you can do 1, 2, 3 races. So I got to go do Music City, which the crit series in Nashville, which was awesome. It was like, it was such a good, like, just friendly environment. Like it was cool just seeing all these people, and it was like this cool race where like I never heard people cheering at a bike race before, and like raced under the lights at like in the dark. It was so cool. And got to do those, started like getting a little experience like going faster in races, attacking, and that kind of did that, got some points, and then got to Tiger Lane and got the Cat 2 upgrade from the state champs race, that was so brutally hot that day. That was
I don't think there's been a not hot Tiger Lane state championship. The last two have been miserable.
It's still in my skin suit afterwards, laying in a swimming pool, just like trying to bring myself back to life. But I got the 2 upgrade there, and then probably 2 weeks later, a guy that ran a team called Space City, it was a U23 development thing that he had started. And he called me and basically said, hey, we have a spot. We want to let you guest ride. We have a couple mutual friends. He's like, I've heard you've kind of made like some really big moves, and just, do you want to come race a USA Crit? Do you want to do the D1, like the big race? And I said yes. I remember driving down there, like borderline hyperventilating of like, this is going to be so bad. Like, I'm in so much trouble. I'm in way over my head. Like, and it worked out. It was super cool.
Well, because the first race was Birmingham Hammerfest.
Yeah,
I remember being there, and you hung tight the entire race, right?
Yeah, we were there.
Yeah. And that was a course it was a short course. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of people that got shelled on that. just because it was fairly technical just due to the nature of how small it was.
I was so scared of getting dropped that I basically put myself just dead center in the washing machine. It was just like, I am just, like the part, everyone's swirling around in the race trying to fight for positions, and just like, I just wanted to be up there. I remember like first race, get caught in a crash, like didn't even understand how pits work. Just all the officials were yelling like, do this, do that, do this, you stay over here. And then like they send me back in, and yeah, it ended up working out. I got to finish it. I think I was 33rd the first one, which like, I was all bummed about it, and then I get done and they're like, no, like that's awesome, like you finished. Like
going from the drive down there where you're in over your head to finishing 33rd, it's so much like this would be a side tangent we could get into, but there's so much mental that goes into all of this stuff, and confidence. Like us three coaches have talked a bunch about how mentality is a huge aspect to it, but confidence, like we'll sometimes when we're designing a program for someone, it may not be the perfect from like a structure standpoint, but if you're wanting your athlete to get some wins, from their training, as opposed to getting done with each one like totally maxed out, that plays into it. So you build confidence, and that's that's a huge thing.
And it was cool. Like I remember being in the race, and there's someone bumping my elbow, and I look over and see a Legion jersey, and I'm like, oh my, like this is so, like it was like a little like fangirl moment. And then
you said sorry, sir. And
yeah, literally, as you know, I will say sorry at the top of my lungs in a race. Yeah, and I mean, so much of the confidence thing too. I mean, that was like what was so cool when we started working together, was like just getting to understand like, hey, it's not always going to be perfect. Like, hey, things go wrong. Like at the end of the day, like, that's what we're here to do. On top of building your fitness, like you need to be happy, you need to have balance, you need to like be confident.
Exactly. No,
I think an important thing to note here, and I mentioned it in the beginning, is that all of this, from the time that you decided to do, basically get on a bike, to the time you are now racing D1 races, is just over a year. Like it's very, very,
super
very
quick.
quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it
Does not happen normally.
Yeah, it was like 6 or 7 months of, I'm on the street in Sumatenga,
Sleeping on the Wolf River trails.
And then we're
stealing a van, and suddenly he's
and then now I've had this meteoric rise to, helping a teammate clean his road rash, like after a big crit.
That's a skill in of itself. That's a different session.
Oh my gosh.
So now we're towards the end. Did you do more of those D1 races that year? Because there was still Athens or something was after that still, right?
So that was actually a pretty crazy year. So after that race, I went and did the 1-2 race at Joe Martin, the stage race.
Okay.
So then that was when they still put us on the UCI course the first day. So we got to do like the monster. It was literally the longest ride I'd ever done, was that race. Was climbing Mount Gaylor. I remember there's a picture of it somewhere where my tongue's really upside down in my mouth. I don't know how that's physically possible, but I was just jersey unzipped dying. But got to do that. That was a cool experience. I think I got a top 10 in the crit, I want to say.
Tough crit too.
And then that crit that's just such a cool area. Like it's so hard, but it's just cool. Like it's downtown Fayetteville.
Yeah.
And God, after that did El Paso, which was, I just didn't know what I was doing. I still hadn't figured out that like, hey, you can't just, do this crazy 20-hour drive and expect to be amazing at a bike race, like, the next day. And then we had like a 3-hour long ride that morning. Like it was super goofy. So that one went rough.
Johnny, do you approve of that scenario?
Like perfect pre-race plan right there.
Just like Coach Johnny would script it up there.
Oh yeah. And that was pretty tough. I remember that was a very silent drive back of like, man, like, did I just like, was that it? Was that the best I'm ever going to do? And then we get to Winston-Salem. So that was the last race of the year for me before the most hotly debated race in Memphis, Grit and Grind. But we we get to Winston-Salem, and I was so nervous. I was like, I just got dropped out of El Paso. Like, this is going to be so bad. And I had a climb in it, and it was like, I'm in this. Like, this is cool. Like, I'm not even hanging on to the back. Like, I'm like on the front of the race. Like, I didn't know there was a break up the road at the time, but it was like, I kind of feel like I belong a little bit. And then it was my first top 20. It was like, I got an 18th there.
Huge.
And I just remember it was like this crazy moment of like sitting down. I was the only guy on the team that finished. And it wasn't, not to say that as like a bragging thing, but it was so cool to get back. And all these guys that I had looked at of being these insanely fit dudes were all sitting there like, you did awesome. Like, that was insanely cool to watch. And they're pumped. And it was that first, like, this is sweet. Like
validation to the whole
exactly.
thing. Well, you were having a great, so Dale and I actually were sitting in this here office of his /studio/ watching the
Multi-purpose
U.S.
room.
Pro road race last year that you guys were both in, and I mean you were hanging tight for the first half before flat, right?
That was the first mechanical I'd gotten in a race.
Well, it's because you'd only done 6.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're still like 12 months into racing bikes.
I was literally like, I got a flat tire. What do? I just did what I saw on TV. I was like, I think, what was it? Like, is it front wheels left hand, back wheels right hand, or something like that?
Wait, I got to.
You could do like David Miller and just throw your bike. And
I almost
an
wanted to.
option.
Yeah, I just threw my hand up. The guy comes out, and I'm just yelling what rotor size I have, and it's my front wheel, and he's just there. Like, he's like freaking out. I'm all nervous because I don't know what's going on. And like, I can sometimes not be the most even keel person in that. And yeah, so I was so upset after that because it's like, man, like I felt like I was doing well, and then I get to the curb, I get back, and I'm very close to my older 2 brothers, and we're calling the middle one, and I'm tearing up, like I'm upset about it, and he's like, wait, so you got a flat? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, have you gotten a flat before? I remember it went from like crying to this weird, like almost insane laughter of like, no, I haven't.
First for everything. Yeah. All right, so we get to the end of successful first year. I mean, if you go back and rewind it all, and if you'd ask yourself when you're on the concrete in Sumatanga where you would end up that year, huge progress.
Yeah, I'd have said
gains.
flipping burgers, not doing that. Like
yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now, kind of talk us through where y'all two's relationship sort of kicked off.
Yeah, so we get done with Winston-Salem. I get back, and the Grit and Grind gravel race was going on. And I remember Will, the guy that ended ladding, it was just another one of those like super generous things. He's like, hey, this race is coming up. It'd be really cool if you did it. He's like, if you want, here's a gravel bike you can use. We'll get it set up for you. You can spend some time on it before, like however you want to set it up, you can do it. And then let's let you do the race. I think you'd be good at it. And like worst case, like it'll be a fun thing for ladding. Like you'll get to go out and just represent. And it was cool because like I hadn't gotten to do a lot of local races at that point. So it was just fun like seeing people that I knew.
Yeah.
And then we get to the start line and they call old Jonny Brown up. And I remember one being like, I've heard about this guy because again, I was always a fan of the sport. I'd been this huge fan of him and his brother, but really more so, I'd known more about you. And I just remember being so nervous, like genuinely, like it's probably kind of funny now. I don't know how much we've really talked about this, but I was just like a nervous wreck going into the race and was like, just do what he does. Like, just follow him. It was him, you, and Aiden Reuter at the time. It was just like, I just got to like follow these guys. And like worst case, if it doesn't go well, like, we'll figure that out. But like, let's just see how long you can hang on. And I remember it ended up being like the 3 of us off the front of the race. And then you got a flat at the end, which sucked. And then
I was on a borrowed bike also.
Yeah, Johnny was on a bike that was like 8 sizes too large.
Yeah, Johnny was in the drops.
I
Looked like he was standing up.
Have been on a cruiser.
I was so thankful that you were actually giving some draft. I was like, oh, thank goodness, this guy's height of his handlebars is
I still remember
providing
the
me some
attack
draft.
was so funny because you stood up and your height didn't change. You
The
just weren't on the seat
bars,
anymore.
my saddle was lower than the bars.
It's perfect bike fit.
Yeah.
Perfect bike fit.
It's great.
Yeah.
No, I remember barely being able to catch y'all's 2-wheel. Like you guys were gone. I was like, oh, that's it. I got to be there. And I was flat out on the rivet when I caught back onto you. And I was like, if they do any sort of acceleration right here, I'm gone. And fortunately, I got like just enough. I suffered through that whole first lap and like barely.
Did I attack the first lap?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
It was pretty early
That's a
on.
good
It
strategic
was
playing
first
right
gravel
there.
of first lap. Yes, you were hitting it. All right, so get to know each other, and we're the end of 2022 season, and that's when you guys essentially started working together more. And then you formally came on as a coached athlete closer to November, December. But what did y'all talk about? Like, what was the as we're at that spot, and we're looking towards 2023 season now, right? We're into 2023. No, we're going into 2022. Right?
Yeah, because this was at the end of 2021.
That's right.
And I had just come back to America from Europe, and I came to Grit and Grind because we were moving to Murfreesboro. And I stopped on the way, and I remember seeing this Space City kid. I'm like, why is this kid from Texas here? No idea who he is. And I knew Space City just from and I knew the kid that runs it. So I'm like, why is one of the Texas kids up here? And then that's how I met him, was there. And then I invited him to come ride with me in Middle Tennessee. That's then I kind of started helping him out through 2022.
That's right. Okay. So let's dive into, we'll call this chapter 2 now, 2022. You've now had some decent results. What's 2022 look like? Did you change your training? How was your approach to that year?
I don't think a lot changed. Like mentally, a lot had changed of like, okay, I have this goal. I want to do the Pro Nationals road race. That was like going into it. I've been told that was an option because I was a 2 at this point. I've been told if I get my 1 upgrade, I can apply and get like the UCI license, and then I can do Pro Nationals. They'll get me an entry.
Yeah.
So that was everything. Like I did not care about any other race that year other than I need to get points. So, I mean, I was doing all the early season Texas stuff, which like I was doing it out of this like, this is like the only stuff early in the year that, which shows how little I know. I thought that was like it. And which ended up being cool because that's like Texas racing. That was incredible to get to see that. Yeah. And it was awesome.
It's hard too. Like Texas early spring stuff, especially like in nowadays America, that road racing will be the hardest road racing you can do in America for sure.
Oh, really?
And it's very like spring classic wise with weather. It can be nice, but majority of the time it's cold and raining.
So is it?
And they race hard.
Texas throughout the year, or Texas primarily spring?
Texas spring road racing at least. I mean, Texas racing in general is probably some of the best you'll get in the country. So they have a lot of strong riders, and that's like, if you want road racing now in America, that's the place to go.
Gotcha. And how did it all go for you?
It was great. I remember the first day. It was Lago Vista, and it was I think it was like all over crit drama. There was a truck in the middle of the finish line, and like I had
Perfect.
As I just hyped it up.
Yeah, it was one of those goofy things. Like that was just like that day, just something funny happened. There ended up being a truck on course, and like it really didn't. It was in front of the finish line, like it was past it, so it really didn't. But like it was just chaos. I was like somewhere just mid pack in the sprint, because it's a common theme for 2022 of blowing matches like crazy, thinking I was Superman. And the second day was incredible. One of my teammates kind of like rode just slightly in front of everyone, and I was like, "I'll just get on his wheel," and then we hit a climb kind of hard, and I turn around and it's like 15 of us, and that's it. And it's like I just made the break. Like is that how that works? Like, okay, this is cool. And then we get to the end, and like I was so tired and didn't understand fueling and just cramped up in the sprint. I think I ended up like probably is inaccurate, but I think it was like 8th or 9th. Like it wasn't anything like I guess to write home about in my head, but also it was cool. Like I did well in like a big race. Like that was another one of those little small victories.
Yeah.
So at this point, are you still kind of like winging your training, or is that is this that now where you're kind of like listening to what JB's been telling you, or you're just kind of filtering through what you think is BS coming from a guy that's raced in Europe?
So pretty much whatever he said. So I had a coach at the time. His name was Lucas Wall, and Lucas was great. And I was doing stuff, but one of the big issues were like he was in Michigan, I was here, like, and I was just one of those people. I knew so little that I really did need someone like actually seeing what I was doing. And it got great because riding with them on these Sunday rides, and then the few times I could go on like a Saturday or sometime, like I would just get all these little like tidbits of advice, like, hey, do this, hey, do that, hey, you're going way too hard right now, like don't get in that gray zone, like just little things like that. So it was like always giving me advice, which was great, because I remember like I would throw off my entire training plan for the week purely because I wanted to go up and ride with them, because it was like I just knew that no matter what, even if I just destroyed myself physically riding with them, because I wasn't like, I didn't have a base, I wasn't like capable of doing that, but I just wanted to hang on because it was cool. Like one, getting to ride with someone that I looked up to, still do, and then on top of that, just getting to like learn all these little bits that he had learned, not just from like someone telling him, but from like, hey, I applied this in a big race and it worked, or it didn't work. And just like actually being like, okay, like I believe him.
So what was training volume like for you, would you say? Were you trying to train a lot? Were you like reading the stuff on the pros and these vlogs, and you're like, wow, so-and-so's doing 25-hour weeks?
Johnny
I'll answer
Johnny
this
just-
for you.
Yeah, he can.
I saw Johnny smirk, so I think there's a good answer coming.
His training plan would go as he would come ride with us, and he did not really ride through the winter. So he'd come ride with us, get sick, and not ride for like 2 weeks. And then once he felt
So it was
better,
full
he'd
gas.
come ride with us again.
Full gas,
And then get sick again.
high volume, high intensity,
Yeah.
get sick.
That was
Heal up,
that was
rinse,
his
repeat.
cycle from like December.
So were you like a big group ride guy?
I liked them, especially like the early morning ones where like you and I started to get to spend more time together. And then like G-Pack, the one that we did last night, of like, I loved those like super fast short ones because I don't know any way to describe it, but I would use them as like a metric of like, which was probably not the right way of going about it. But for me, it was like, okay, like I'll spend a couple of weeks doing my own thing and then I'll go back to Peddler or I'll go back to G-Pack and let's just see how it goes. Let's see if I can attack for longer or I can pull the group for a certain amount of time and not die. Like that was kind of what I would use them for. And it was fun because like I got to know a lot of people through that. And then I would do some grind city rides like and some of the like local training group stuff around here. Like it was just I would just kind of use them as like a social thing, and then the faster ones like a performance metric.
Gotcha. So
all group rides.
Yeah, I would say like I would go through like spurts.
okay.
He loved the going hard zone.
Yeah.
I'm like going like 22 miles an hour zone.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
That was his favorite.
Not the super hard zone.
I'm in the pointless zone all day.
Gotcha. A lot of gray zone. A lot of gray zone
Love
work.
the gray zone.
I'm trying to think.
Let me see how long I can
out right now.
Let me see how long I can
There's a
pull
lot of people
for.
I
yeah.
want to call out right now on this podcast, but I won't.
It's so
And then
funny.
but then he'd come ride with us, and it was the classic like wanted to ride so hard, and we're trying to do a long ride, and that's why he'd blow himself too. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Gotcha. Major wins from 2022. What would you say?
I'd say 8th at the Joe Martin crit purely because that's what got me my 1 upgrade.
Gotcha.
And that was just a huge one for me because it was like, hey, like I did it. Like I got the 1 upgrade. I get to go to Pro Nats now. And then after that,
And that's where he had the flat tire. Right? I was a year.
Yeah, you guys kind of jumbled that up a little there.
Yeah.
yeah. So we get through. We get the 1 upgrade, and right after that was Tulsa Tough. And that was like I had been nervous going into crits before, and that was like a totally different one of like you're asleep in the middle of the night and you pop up like you've come out of an exorcism, just like, oh my gosh, I'm about to race Tulsa Tough. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like watching all like the hype videos and stuff from all the different teams, and just like I might not make it through a single day. And you know, the first day it was just like it was kind of meh. Like got caught in a crash in the last lap. Like didn't go down, but just like, you know, at that point, like it's over. And then the second day was like Johnny was off the front basically the whole race, and I was singing Foo Fighters, My Hero, in my head the whole time. And then we get to the end, and it's like, hey, I just finished like top quarter of that race, and like I was like involved. Like that was fun. Like I got to like be on the front at times, like rip corners and pass dudes. Like this is sweet. And then we get to Crybaby, and I had kind of written off that day of like, this is in my head the course that suits me the most, but like I'm gonna be so tired. It's so hot. Like this
So
isn't
the
gonna go
positive
well.
self-talk was
It was not at a high.
Not at a high.
It was not. I was literally more concerned with taking care of, like, it sounds like kind of a dorky thing to say. I was more concerned of making sure that my teammates had like ice socks and like that we were all good.
You were
One of them,
the Soigné instead
basically,
of
one of them was doing the 1-2 race before, and I was like, he had like broken a helmet. I was like finding him kit like all before. Like I literally was running around the course the whole time before we even started the race. And
It's a good warm up.
it was a great
But
warm up.
without him even knowing, that's probably the best thing for him because he wasn't in his own head for
Yeah.
hours.
And we get into the race. I didn't even realize that feeding was a thing in that race. There was no one even feeding me. And we get halfway through the race, and it's like, I'm in this now. I'm not going to be in it for much longer because there's no bottles on my bike, and it's like 120 degrees, and like this is not going to go well. And out of nowhere, it was like I just feel this magical cooling, which is like, okay, this is me passing out, and it's actually Johnny right next to me dumping water down my neck. Might have been scratch, we don't know, but
certainly sticky.
yeah. And then it was him, and I remember, I think, was it Josh, maybe? Was he in that race? Mm-hmm. So I remember it was the two of y'all. Like, each one, you gave me a bottle at one point, and then I think he did. And then I just remember it was you and then Brandon P. Harry at one point. Both of y'all said, you've got this. And I just remember, like, these two guys are, like, paying attention right now. Like, this is... It was, again, like, I just have these little fangirl moments throughout races just because, like, I'm a fan of the sport. Mm-hmm. And it was just, like, this cool, like, I can do this. Like, it was, like, you know, instantly, like, heart rate goes down, power goes up. Like, I got this. And then, like, other people from other teams that I knew started, like, handing me bottles. And it was, like, it was this cool thing. Like,
Did a
all
few
these
beer hand ups.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what was in those bottles. But, but Yeah, and then I think I ended up I might have been like 20th or 21st or something like that. Like in my head, like was like, okay, cool, like a top 20. But then I remember getting a text from you right afterwards of just like, hey, that was awesome, and just this like cool. Like I remember going up to all of you guys in the Blazers tent and just like wanting to say thank you, and everyone just like setting me down, dumping ice on me. Like it was just this cool.
You're like, do I look that bad?
Yeah, pretty much. It was like
It was obvious.
yeah. And it was just this cool, like, wow, like that just happened. Like that was probably the best ride I've ever had, and I didn't even expect it.
Yeah.
And like I got so many people reaching out of like that was awesome. Like
So did that change your confidence level
absolutely.
going into future races?
Absolutely. It
So
was
that
sort
was
of
like
one of those like, hey, if nothing else, when the racing is hard, I can do well.
All right, so let's fast forward now even more
Mm-hmm.
to off season. So now is when you start working with Johnny. And so what sort of changed there? And Johnny, you can kind of jump in here as well.
I'll throw this in, and this will go with what you're
Okay.
asking. Lob this at JB. I'm picking up that, Mason, you might have not maybe confidence, but you easily get in your own head
Oh,
as
absolutely.
far as, mainly confidence. But how have you guys addressed that side of things?
I mean, you see it with a lot of athletes in general, especially like if you're pretty new at cycling, you have this idea that I guess some of it you haven't raced for that long, so you don't know where your actual fitness is going to fall. So you believe you're not as good as you are. The biggest thing you can tell most people in general is just like the calmer you are leading into an event, probably the better it's going to go. And if you're in your own head before, you're already manifesting how it's going to go. So it's really just relaying and helping them to just calm their mind prior and actually giving them the confidence leading in that you are as good as, like, this is the facts, and whether those facts are you're going to finish or be at the front or be mid-pack, whatever it is, you can achieve that goal and actually believing that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even like racing at different times of the year, you have to understand that you're going to be fitter at different times, and setting up expectations with where your fitness is right now, and understanding that so-and-so is rolling right now. So like that's a bad, like comparing yourself to them right now at this time of year, you could easily be equivalent to that later, but you have to set up the expectation.
Well, and that's some of it. You have to, each individual athletes all have each individual goals. So maybe your goal is the beginning of the year and you need to get results or do this in the beginning, then of course you're going to be fitter, but it's always remembering that and remembering when you're talking to the athlete that whenever your time of the year is when you're going to, that's when we're peaking and trying to be most fit. So some people that could be July, some people that could be March, but helping them understand that, and especially when you are in the season.
March through July. I'd like to peak from March through July.
September.
And maybe
I
August.
like just peaking all year, to be honest.
Yeah.
Full year peaks.
I was about to say,
Straight
my
to
goal's
gravel.
January to December. Yeah,
Straight to gravel.
Yeah.
And,
I don't peak. I plateau. I
Yeah.
go way up, and then just stay up there.
just
I've just
forever.
been plateaued for 7 years now.
7 years plateau. So how'd you guys approach the off season?
Well, as like the coach, some of it is, say, Mason is a very new professional. And this is going to be his first actual year, we'll say, actually hitting the big races right from the beginning. So as the coach leading in, it's one of those, like, especially with the goals that he has, you want their name to be relevant right from the beginning of the year. So compared to maybe some people that their goal might be certain periods, we wanted to come in a little fitter than, say, some people sometimes, because in cycling, for some reason, if you do well in the beginning of the year too, people remember that. And then maybe you plateau for a little bit, but then if you hit it again at the end of the year, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that guy's been, and they
like the
kind of forget
bookends,
that
right?
they kind of forget that middle zone in pro cycling sometimes. So like leading in, that was kind of the goal. And even like in cycling now, pro cycling in particular, like 3 peaks is kind of like what you can do in a year. So that's kind of like leading into
So
the
is that
year
kind of the
thinking
approach you guys are going with? Is more of like a 3 peak, 2 peak,
I would call it a 3 peak.
3 peak?
Yeah.
Okay. So what are the big goals? So you're on a new team this year, And like, how are you weaving personal goals in with team goals?
So the personal goal is just it's growth in the sport. I kind of always said going into it that I want to go as far as I can go. So it's always looking at like whatever team that I've gotten on. Okay, what's the next step above? And so right now, their big thing is basically trying to be more involved and competitive at races, which works for me. Because with Cliff Bar this year, it's now Cliff Family Drifters. And basically wanting to do well at some of the bigger crits. So started off with Tucson Bicycle Classic. That was sort of a warm up for a lot of guys. And for me was, I'm gonna grab some water.
He's already talked so much his throat hurts.
No, it's chasing you at GPAC the night before. Lungs are still exploded. But no, so basically started the year off wanting to do well at Tucson Bicycle Classic. It's a big field and just wanting to get, a couple of good noteworthy results. And then aside from that, it's really just consistency, which I think was one of the big things that we worked on even this winter of having such a way more consistent of a plan was kind of the previous years, it was way more just like straight up, straight down. I'd either be on the front of the race or I'd be off the back of the race sick. And it's just, trying to kind of stay a little bit more, I guess, even in between those peaks. And again, Johnny will know a lot more about this than I will. But the personal goal is just moving up in the sport. And the great thing with Cliff and having those guys is they're so on board with that. Because I think one of the best ways to put it is the owner and the one that runs it, Dylan, basically put your growth coincides with our growth. So it's basically just, I don't know, trying to go out there and what's that?
Yeah, I was going to say, just get better together, right?
Yeah,
Continue
exactly.
to learn.
And it's been so cool because it's such a good group of guys to do that with. And they're all so fired up about that. And it's been could not have asked for a better setup with that. And just even having more wisdom to draw from. And so I think personal goals for me really is getting into pro nats again and then doing well at that, hopefully. And then really aside from that, just trying to, we were talking about that the other day, just getting those races where it's consistent, you can try and get those top 10s, top 5s, and then, some of them of taking that crazy risk and just, sending it at some point, just seeing what happens. Even if it's you get caught and get blown right off the back, it's like, hey, I tried. Just trying to go for that.
So were there any, JB, were there any major limiters that you picked out in his fitness that you guys worked on in the off season or are working on presently?
Well, the hardest was he was used to just riding hard all the time, like I already kind of said. So really, the biggest was one, he never even had a consistent actual training. And you see this a lot with newer cyclists or just getting into it. They'll ride really hard for 3 days or what they think is endurance, but they're really riding zone 3, zone 4 a lot. And then they're cooked for days. So then they take a bunch of time off. And he just had this weird cycle of no consistency at all. He'd have 1 week where he would do a lot of hours, and then he would have 2 weeks of 5 hours. So really the biggest limiter was leading into you. And then he'd and then with that, through the season, since he had no actual good foundation, he'd get sick all the time. He'd be pretty good at one race because he is good athlete. But that was his natural ability, really. And then 2 weeks later, he'd have strep throat. So really, leading into the winters, you need to take actual time off after the season and just restart.
Can you repeat that for everyone?
Well, this
that's
actually goes
listening?
to everybody in general. If you're doing a full season or have big goals in general, is people then automatically want to go straight back into it. And even with the 3 peaks, in cycling now in particular, old school used to be you'd end the season, take 3-4 weeks off, but now it's kind of turned into after each major peak and goal, you take 5 to 7 days off in the season and then kind of restart from there. And then at the end of the season, it's 2 weeks instead of 4 weeks for the whole big period. So really for the winter, it was one, you just need to start at a good foundation, and it's just going to be riding actual zone 2. And actually figuring that out and going off a heart rate versus just power. So that's a big misconception a lot of times. My zone 2s will say 200 watts, but really when they're doing that after 2 hours for heart rates in zone 3, which then you're just in that gray zone again.
Yeah, the fatigue resistance isn't there to actually be able to stay zone 2 heart rate with zone 2 power.
Yep.
At which point you need to scale down so that you're not over stressing that body.
I think that's a big misconception in training in general, is that zone 2 heart rate and zone 2 power do not always correlate.
And especially for like, if you're doing road racing and you don't have that good foundation, the thing is with road racing is you're sitting in that zone for a long time. But if your heart rate is taking off or you haven't actually done it, then you're not going to have the ability to actually do it. So when we're finishing these longer rides, if your heart rate drift is out of control, then you still need to like keep working in that zone. So really, like through the winter, it was just getting them consistent and actually like building a good foundation before we even built on that. And just him alone actually getting a good foundation and good base miles, we'll call it, was a massive boost in his fitness in general and his sickness. I mean, he got sick maybe once this winter, which that happens to anybody through the winter.
That's actually really damn good for this winter.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we did a whole podcast on how bad the winter was.
And last winter, you were sick like every other week.
Constantly, yeah. My coworkers had the joke of what's wrong with Mason today.
And
just play hooky off riding.
But it really
Pretty
just,
much.
because it turned into him riding so hard, he'd get himself sick, and then he would be in that weird cycle, but he actually like properly built his body up to where handling the volume and the higher intensity a lot better.
Taking an off season was huge too. That was even just mentally, that was so great. I mean, I remember sitting in the Miami airport and it's like, all right, we're going to go get like some nachos. Like we're going to go, like, let's just actually like enjoy that we've done a long, hard season. Let's take weeks and actually just get healthy and, actually sleep, like have a social, like not that you can't have a social life and train, but like that's one of the great things is having balance, being able to do that. But just actually like get away from the bike, like go, like it might drive you a little crazy the first week or so, but like go just enjoy like not being an athlete every day and just taking care of yourself and being healthy and just feeling good. So then it's like we get back into training and it was kind of felt like I could start from scratch again, which I think was kind of what was needed of like, let's just start over. Let's do these rides at 180 watts, 190 watts, and just cruise and like actually learn how to do it properly.
And I think you build confidence with that. I mean, that's been one of the nice things about Johnny's experience and the amount of time he spent at the high end of the sport is you're kind of wanting to follow along the path that he has also done. So the confidence in knowing, well, okay, if he's telling me I should do this, and if he's doing this himself, like, okay, I can trust in the fact that that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So were there any like, you mentioned before that you didn't really have a clue about fueling and hydration. Are there things that you guys have adapted to changed, even just daily nutrition or, anything that we've changed there that has seemed to be a big improvement?
So I guess it was probably the other night, made the running joke that I know nothing about food. And one of the biggest changes for me was because I was, like working and training and stuff and just really didn't understand balance. And I don't think I was horrible about cooking for myself, was always eating out. And one of the biggest things, I remember it started with eggs and toast of whenever we'd hang out or go ride, we'd have eggs and toast in the morning. And I remember oh, this is really good. And then I just started eating it's not like I have some perfect, amazing diet, but it was just go to the grocery store, get just some very simple things and eat that. Find what you like. And it's, down to, I eat peanut butter and jelly for lunch. That's, it's what little kids eat, but it's simple. It's I feel better.
Better than a Big Mac.
Yeah, it's way better than,
What was that thing you were eating all the time? Not Pop-Tarts. What was it?
Oh, toaster strudels. Look, I can say my first year and some change was powered purely off of toaster strudels, Pop-Tarts, and Breville espresso. That one's for
That's
Will.
the diet right there.
Diet of champions right there.
That could also be why he was sick all winter.
Once micronutrients started coming into the equation, the body started feeling a whole lot better.
It's man, I actually have energy now and I sleep better. It's great. Hey, my skin looks great now. But yeah, I mean, it literally was down to just the simple things of just eat real food. And when you're on the bike, just think about your stomach, think about how many doing gut training rides, things like that, of just actually pay attention to what works for you. And little simple things like what we were talking about the other day of you're taking down all these carbs, you have to have water to absorb it. It's just those little simple things that unless someone tells you, like, or you go do the research on your own, you're just not going to know about. So it's just like kind of just these little simple things that just all add up.
Yeah, you gotta just kind of chip away. I mean, let's face it, you're still very new.
Yeah.
Still very new to the sport. I think you've learned a lot in a short amount of time,
Yeah.
and that is part of the reason why you've, kind of rocket shipped up to the level that you're at in such a short amount of time. So, like, last kind of thing, and we've talked about it a little bit with taking the breaks and triple peaking and stuff like that. But are there any other major things that you guys are incorporating? Because the season's long, like that you guys are incorporating so that you make it through a long season, hitting those peaks without truly plateauing or just working yourself into a hole, basically.
I mean, some of it is a well-balanced life in general. If you get so focused in, mentally you'll burn out before anything. So that's like, for any athlete really at especially a higher level, is remembering, like, if you're getting so focused, you're going to mentally burn out. So reminding that as well, like, just relax, follow the process, but also, like, still enjoy yourself. I think has been like a good one. And then really, like, training wise, also just making sure not overdoing it, because even he is still new to cycling. So it's not like he has years of built up and all that. So it's like, you got to remember it's still a process and it takes time. So don't get too gung-ho.
Yeah, you still have to keep good awareness on like building a foundation still. It's not like someone who's raced for 15 years that has that massive foundation built. Like, someone who's newer to the sport should be doing less intensity and more base style stuff throughout the year, and should almost be, on the underside of training versus the overside.
Yeah, exactly. Because especially like with the long season, like, you don't actually need to do that much like super high intensity, because you're going to naturally get that from the races already. And the more high intensity you do, and then if you're racing on top of that, it's going to just wreck you. Especially with doing crits, like, you almost don't really need to do any above zone 4 work, because you're already going to get all of that week in and week out. And then if you're trying to do that also during the week on like a Tuesday or Wednesday, you're going to be wrecked by like May.
Yeah.
And then you're also just going to, you might as well just keep doing endurance in zone 3 through the week, even in the season. So otherwise you will be
We're pulling
wrecked.
that section out. Clip. That's going to be a clip. That one's going on.
This is where it can be challenging. Vast majority of the people that we deal with aren't those that are training
But
high level.
the thing is, even if you're just a group ride guy, we'll say, even if you're the fastest or slowest guy in the group ride, you're going to get that high intensity right there.
Exactly.
Like, if you're going to the fast group ride in your city, that's going to be your very, very high intensity right there. So then if you're trying to do high intensity also, like, I'm talking very high intensity. So we're talking like really high zone 4, zone 5, zone 6 stuff. Then if you're doing that also on your own, 2 days a week, we'll say 1 day a week, you will feel the effects.
And then the group rides that you're doing on the weekend.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's going to be zero quality.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess the benefit and kind of where I was going to go with it was, like, if you got a person who's a Cat 4, they go and race a weekend.
Weekday crits, man.
And their crits are super short. They go and do the group rides, not super long, intensity super high. And essentially it's a whole lot of training that, kind of what you were talking about, lots of high intensity, not much that actually keeps that foundation built, and that plateau, injury, whatever ends up happening, you don't have the results that you're wanting. The high end isn't there anymore because you're doing so much of it and the body's worn down. And a lot of folks end up like, okay, well, I need to do more high intensity stuff.
Like, even I found personally, like, when I actually pretty much strip mainly high intensity and I don't really do above zone 4, I'm the snappiest I can be actually when I get to the races, because I actually still have it in the system. So if I do in training, I'm doing a bunch of high intensity, by the time I actually get to either a group ride or a race, I can just kind of stay at that like grind pace, and I can't go above it. But when I actually don't do it and I just let the races get that training for me for then the next race, that's when I do the best.
market.
Yeah.
That one's going. That's a pretty good summary, and I think for what like everything that you guys have gone through even applies to everyone who races bikes and wants to improve as a cyclist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a process. You can't always beat yourself to death. You need to build a foundation and not just go hard all the time.
And then be aware, like, as you level up or as you improve, you start putting greater expectations on yourself, and the desire to win, get a result, whatever. It can be easy to have your mindset of, I'm only as good as my last workout, or I'm only as good as my last race. Johnny and I have talked quite a bit about this. Whereas we want people to like be aware of the trend, be aware of where you're going in the process. Not every day is going to be great. Not every race is going to be great, but your goal is to think long term, think about the trend, and take the wins along the way, and don't beat yourself up on the days where it doesn't go
That's
well.
the thing with cycling in general too. Say like other sports, you have very limited events you do maybe, but with cycling, it's like, especially cycling, you do so much that the thing is you can't win everyone too. Even use the top riders in cycling, they actually win very little in comparison to how much they're racing.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually think about it, they do like 80 race days a year. They win like 5 a year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Clip it.
There's another one.
Keep flipping them.
We're gonna just make the last like 10 minutes of this podcast like the whole podcast.
Just all YouTube shorts.
That's right. All right. Yeah. No, that's awesome, guys. I appreciate you guys coming in and giving your time and kind of outlining a lot of this stuff because it is really relevant. So, Mason, appreciate you being on today. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out, listening, watching. Catch you guys next time.
See you later.
Adios.
Peace.